Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The late afternoon sun bathed the sidewalks in a golden light. Passers-by came and went, busy, distracted, unaware that, in a few minutes, a scene of injustice would freeze the entire neighborhood. Elise Duval, a black woman in her 40s, elegant in a beige dress and carrying a simple handbag, was leaving a small neighborhood bookstore. In her hands, she held a novel she had just bought for her husband, a police commissioner with a passion for literature. Her step was calm and confident, and her discreet smile reflected the peace of an ordinary afternoon. But this peace was abruptly shattered when a police car suddenly pulled up beside him. The screeching of the tires startled several people. A man in uniform rushed downstairs. It was Officer Morel, in his 30s, with a closed face and a hard, suspicious look, a policeman known for his brutality and arrogance. "You there! Stop immediately," he shouted in a loud voice. Elise froze, surprised. "Pardon? I don't understand." "Your papers, right away," he replied curtly. She calmly rummaged through her bag. "Of course, officer. Is something wrong?" Morel approached, observing every gesture with suspicion. "I was told about a woman matching your description, who allegedly tried to steal a phone on this street." "A theft?" repeated Elise, shocked. "But I just bought this book, look." She showed the receipt, still folded between the pages. But Morel was no longer listening. He walked around her, inspecting her bag without asking her permission. "Don't touch me, sir," she protested in a trembling voice. "You have no right to open my bag like that." "Are you giving me orders now?" he snapped, his jaw clenched. "Put your hands on the car. Now." Passers-by had stopped. A mother was covering her son's eyes. A young man took out his phone, hesitating to film. Elise tried to remain calm. "Officer, listen to me, I am Commissioner Dove's wife." But she didn't have time to finish. The police officer grabbed her roughly by the arm, twisted her around and slammed her against the hood of the patrol car. "Resist arrest," he shouted, as if to justify himself in front of the crowd. The impact caused his book to fall to the ground. The cover crumpled under the policeman's boot. Elise felt the burning sensation of the hot metal against her cheek. "Stop. I didn't do anything." Without a word, Morel handcuffed her and slapped her violently. The clatter echoed through the street. Silence followed, heavy and stifling. A woman in the crowd shouted, "Hey! It's a disgrace. Can't you see she hasn't done anything?" But Morel, enraged, gave a look that made everyone back away. Elise, with tears in her eyes, breathed slowly and murmured in a calm, almost prophetic voice, "You don't know who I am." Morel sneered. "It doesn't matter who you are. Before the law, we're all the same, aren't we?" He made her get into the car, her head down, while the scandalized crowd filmed. The doors slammed. The car drove away, leaving behind an icy silence and a book abandoned on the sidewalk, speckled with dust. What Officer Morel didn't know was that the woman he had just humiliated and beaten was none other than Elise Duval, the wife of his direct superior, Chief Commissioner Julien Duval, a man respected throughout the national police force. And this mistake would cost him much more than a simple reprimand. The patrol car's engine shut off with a brief rumble in front of the old 12th District Police Station. The pale neon lights flickered, casting a cold light on the damp concrete. Officer Morel got out of the car, still stiff, and abruptly opened the rear door. Elise Duval, still handcuffed, slowly emerged, her wrists reddened by the metal, her face still marked by the slap he had given her. Her gaze remained dignified, but one could read in her eyes a mixture of pain, shock and disbelief. "Move forward," said Morel in a dry tone. She obeyed without a word. Each step echoed in the empty corridor of the police station. The officers on duty silently raised their heads as she passed, some exchanging hesitant glances. The scene seemed absurd, this woman, well-dressed and clearly educated, bore no resemblance whatsoever to the ordinary suspects brought here. A young police officer, Officer Leroy, whispered to Morel. "Boss, are you sure this is the right person? Doesn't seem like." "Mind your own business," Morel interrupted abruptly. "She's a suspect. And she disrespected me." He pushed Elise into a small interrogation room with gray walls. She sat down on the metal chair without resisting, placing her clasped hands on the table. Morel, standing opposite her, began to fill out a report, without even looking up. "Name, surname?" "You already have them," she replied in a soft but firm voice. "Answer the question, madam." She sighed. "Elise Duval." "Profession?" "It doesn't matter." Morel looked up, irritated. "Listen to me carefully. You are here for theft and resisting arrest. So avoid acting arrogant." Elise stared at him calmly. "I didn't steal anything. You arrested me without evidence, without reason. And you hit me in front of witnesses." A silence fell. Morel looked away, uncomfortable for a moment, then chuckled nervously. "Hit? Are you kidding? You just tripped, that's all." Elise lowered her head. A strand of hair fell onto her cheek. She murmured. "You know, I often meet men like you, convinced that their uniform gives them every right. But the truth always comes out in the end." Morel clenched his fist, containing his anger. End of the interrogation. "You will spend the night here, Mrs. Duval. We'll see what the judge says tomorrow morning." He had her taken to a cell by Officer Leroy. Before closing the door, the young policeman, visibly embarrassed, whispered. "I'm sorry, ma'am. What he did, it wasn't right." Elise gave him a tender look. "Don't apologize for other people's mistakes, my boy. But remember what you just saw. One day, it might come in handy." The door closed. The metallic sound of the lock echoed for a long time in the corridor. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, in an elegant and quiet house, Chief Commissioner Julien Duval nervously consulted his watch. He was pacing back and forth in the living room, his phone in his hand. He had called his wife several times, but received no answer. "Elise never came home late without letting us know." "Elise, where are you?" he murmured, worried. At that precise moment, his phone vibrated. A message from a colleague. "Julien, you should come to the 12th Arrondissement police station. There's a black woman arrested by Morel, she says her name is Elise Duval." His heart stopped for a second. He reread the message several times, incredulous, before anger and fear mingled in his eyes. He grabbed his jacket with a sharp gesture and left the house without saying a word. On the road, the flashing lights of his service car lit up the night. Chief Commissioner Duval was rushing ahead, his face grim, a single thought swirling in his head. If it is indeed her, then Morel has just signed the end of his career. Tires screeched in front of the 12th District Police Station. The car door slammed violently, and Chief Commissioner Julien Duval stepped out quickly, his face closed, his dark eyes burning with contained anger. The guards at the entrance, surprised to see him arrive at such a late hour, immediately snapped to attention. "Commissioner Duval." "Good evening, sir, you didn't give us any notice of your arrival." "Where is she?" he asked curtly. "Who, sir?" "My wife, where is she?" Silence fell like a guillotine. Nervous glances were exchanged. One of the agents hesitated, then whispered. I think she's in the interrogation room." Officer Morel arrested her. The name dropped like a bombshell. Julien closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath to keep from exploding. Then, in an icy voice. "Take me to him. Now." In the corridor, Morel had just finished his report, looking pleased with himself. He boasted to a colleague. "A stubborn, haughty suspect, you know the type. I had to calm her down a bit. These people think they're above the rules." But he didn't have time to finish. The door to the corridor opened abruptly, and Commissioner Duval entered. There was complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Julian advanced slowly, each of his steps echoing on the tiles. His gaze met Morel's, who tried to regain his composure. Commissioner Duval. What a surprise. Your timing is perfect, I was just about to send you a report. A suspicious woman was arrested this evening, she claims. He stopped. Julian said nothing. His eyes had already turned towards the one-way mirror behind Morel, the one that looked into the interrogation room. On the other side of the glass, Elise, his wife, sat alone, motionless, her wrists bruised, her face bruised. The book she had been holding a few hours earlier lay on the table, stained and creased. Julian felt the ground give way beneath him. A burning sensation rose in his throat. He slowly placed his hand on the glass, as if to make sure he wasn't dreaming. What have you done? He asked in a low, trembling voice. Morel, still unaware of the impending disaster, replied in a falsely confident tone. Just a simple question, sir. She resisted. Nothing serious, just a slap to calm her down. Julian slowly turned towards him. His eyes were black, impenetrable. You hit my wife. Morel's blood freezes. He took a step back. Your wife? No, wait, Commissioner, there must be some mistake, Julian advanced, each word falling like a verdict. You arrested my wife without cause. You humiliated her in the street. You hit her. And you dared to lie in your report. There was total silence in the police station. The young officers were avoiding breathing. Morel tried to justify himself. I didn't know, sir, I swear. She wouldn't obey, she seemed. Enough. The commissioner's voice cracked like a thunderclap. Julian moved closer to him, his face just a few centimeters from his own. You have just committed the worst mistake a police officer can make, hitting an innocent person. And tonight, you chose the wrong victim. He turned to another officer, in a firm tone. Release Ms. Duval immediately. And place Officer Morel in provisional detention. I'm calling the Inspector General right now. Morel tried again. Commissioner, please, I followed protocol, I didn't mean to. Protocol? You have just trampled on the honor of the National Police with your prejudices. Julian opened the door to the interrogation room. Elise raised her head. Their eyes met, a mixture of pain, relief, and silent love. He knelt gently before her, untied the handcuffs from her wrists, then took her hands in his. I'm here, Elise. It's over. She gave a faint smile. I told you, that he didn't know who I was. Julian, his eyes moist, held her close to him under the astonished gazes of the officers. In that silent police station, everyone understood that that night would mark a turning point. Nothing would ever be the same again. Dawn was slowly breaking over the city, but at the 12th Precinct police station, no one was sleeping. The news had spread like wildfire. Officer Morel had arrested and beaten Chief Commissioner Duval's wife. The corridors, usually noisy, were strangely silent. The officers avoided the gaze of the commissioner, who had been working alone in his office for hours, his face closed off, his features drawn. In front of him lay Morel's report, a tissue of lies. Every word, every falsified sentence, was an insult to his wife and to his oath as a police officer. He grabbed a pen, crossed out half the lines, and added at the bottom of the document in firm handwriting. Fraudulent report. Illegal arrest. Disproportionate use of force. Internal investigation required. Then he called the Inspector General. A few hours later, 2 officers in civilian clothes arrived to take Morel into custody. Morel, now pale, exhausted, and visibly nervous, was led into the same interrogation room where he had locked up Elise the day before. Commissioner Duval remained standing, arms crossed, behind the one-way mirror. He said nothing. He observed. The inspector opened the file. Officer Morel, do you acknowledge having arrested a woman named Elise Duval yesterday afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Without a warrant, complaint, or valid reason.
I acted on my intuition. She matched the description of a suspect.
What description?
We found no report in the database.
Morel hesitated, stammered.
Tensions are mounting.
And this intuition, is that what led you to hit her?
Morel lowered his eyes.
She disrespected me, I lost my temper.
The investigator slowly closed the file.
You've lost much more than that, Agent. You've lost your career.
Behind the glass, Julien Duval closed his eyes, exhausted.
It wasn't just a personal matter, it was a symbol. A brutal demonstration of what an institution becomes when pride takes the place of justice. In the hours that followed, the video of the arrest, filmed by a witness, exploded on social media. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and trending hashtags. Hashtag Justice pour Elise, hashtag Abus de pouvoir, hashtag Racism and Uniform. The 24-hour news channels were broadcasting the images. The policeman who tackles Elise, the slap, the crowd that protests, and her dignified face, humiliated but calm. In front of the cameras, Julien Duval made a historic decision. Rather than hiding behind his rank, he chose to speak out. At a press conference, dressed in his impeccably pressed uniform, he stood straight, his eyes fixed on the journalists. Elise, sitting beside him, wore a discreet bandage on her cheek. Julien spoke in a deep, controlled voice, but vibrant with anger and conviction. What my wife went through yesterday is not an isolated incident. It reflects a system that, too often, turns a blind eye to its own failings. Being a police officer means protecting, not humiliating. It means serving the law, not one's prejudices. And today, I want this police station, this institution, to finally look at itself in the face. A murmur rippled through the room. The journalists frantically jotted down every word. I was raised to love justice. But tonight, it is my faith in that justice that has been trampled upon. And I promise you all, this will not go unpunished. Elise gently placed her hand on his. A discreet gesture, but infinitely powerful. She didn't need to speak, her presence, her dignity, were already a message to thousands of invisible women and men. Under pressure from public opinion and the ministry, the affair became a national issue. Morel's name was now synonymous with abuse and shame. The Minister of the Interior himself called Commissioner Duval to express his support and announce a review of intervention protocols. Meanwhile, Elise received hundreds of letters, messages, and flowers. People from all over the country thanked her for keeping her head high, for daring to face brutality without hatred. But for her, nothing was a victory. One evening, sitting in the living room, she said softly to her husband, "What I have experienced, others experience every day, and no one hears them." "Then let's make sure they are heard," he replied. "For you, for them, so that this never happens again." That night, Julien Duval made the decision that would change his career. He launched a national program against discrimination and abuse in the police, open to all officers, from the simple peacekeeper to the highest-ranking officer. And while the newspapers the next day ran headlines, "The Commissioner who defies silence." Morel, meanwhile, waited alone in a cell, meditating on Elise's sentence, the one he had failed to understand. "You don't know who I am." It was not a threat. It was a warning. She was not just the wife of a police commissioner. She was the voice of all those who are not listened to. The big day had arrived. The sky was gray, heavy, as if it knew that morning, in the room of the National Police Disciplinary Council, a verdict would go beyond the simple framework of a sanction. It was going to become a lesson in justice. The room was full. Officers of all ranks, journalists, representatives of the ministry, all had come to attend the appearance of Agent Morel, who had been suspended for several weeks. Sitting alone, dressed in a dark suit, he looked aged, drained. His arrogance had disappeared. His gaze, shifty, sometimes rested on his hands, sometimes on the ground. In the front row, Elise Duval. Calm, Worthy. Her face still bore the faint trace of what had happened, but her gaze shone with an unwavering light. At her side, Chief Commissioner Julian Duval, silent and impassive. He was not there as a husband, but as a guarantor of the justice he had always defended. The President of the Council took the floor. "Ms. Duval, would you like to testify?" She stood up slowly. The entire room held its breath. Each step she took echoed in an almost sacred silence. In front of the microphone, she took a deep breath and spoke in a soft, calm voice, but full of gravity. "That night, I wasn't a police commissioner's wife. I was just a black woman walking down the street, with a book in my hands. And this man, here present, saw in me anything but a citizen. He saw a danger, a pretext, a target." A murmur rippled through the room. Morel lowered his head. But Elise continued, without hatred, with disarming clarity. "I hold no grudge. Because anger doesn't cure anything. But I want what he did to me to serve as a lesson. Not for me. For him. For those who will come after him. Because as long as fear and prejudice guide some of those who wear a uniform, the people's trust will be broken." She paused, then added in a softer voice. "I don't want its destruction. I want its awakening." A heavy silence followed his words. Even the cameras stopped moving. The President of the Council thanked her with a nod. Julian, standing next to her, felt a shiver run through him. She had just said, without violence, everything he had never dared to express publicly. The Council deliberated briefly. When the President returned, his voice echoed through the room. "Considering the seriousness of the facts, the falsification of the report, and the unjustified use of force, Officer Morel is permanently dismissed from the police force." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. But it was not a triumph. It was a cold, necessary, inevitable justice. Morel timidly raised his eyes towards Elise. "Mrs. Duval. I'm sorry." She nodded gently. "I believe you. But remember, it wasn't me you hurt. It was the uniform you were wearing." These words, simple and powerful, were the last he heard before being escorted out of the room. A few months later, in a large amphitheater in the capital, a new training program was launched. Humanity in Uniform, an initiative created by Elise and Commissioner Duval. The goal: to teach recruits and experienced agents the value of listening, restraint and respect. Elise went on stage to deliver the opening speech. She spoke of her story, without bitterness, without anger, but with a deep faith in change. "It's not the law that needs changing," she said, "it's the way we look at others. Justice has no color, no gender, no rank. It begins where fear ends." In the audience, the young recruits listened to him in silence, touched by his sincerity. Julian, sitting in the front row, felt an immense pride wash over him. His wife, the one whom a man had tried to humiliate, now became the voice of dignity and renewal. One evening, as they were returning home, Elise stopped on the sidewalk in front of a bookstore window. Inside, the novel she had bought on the day of her arrest was prominently displayed. She gave a faint smile. "Do you realize? This book is what started it all." "And you're the one who finished it," replied Julian, taking her hand. They looked at each other for a long time. In the reflection of the window, their faces blended with the light from the street lamps. Two scarred souls, but standing tall. Two symbols of a fight they had never chosen, but which they had transformed into hope. And as they resumed their walk through the peaceful night, Elise murmured softly. "Ultimately, what Morel wanted to take away from me was my dignity. And without knowing it, he made me even stronger."